Mandalorian just wrapped up its third season from the hit show in the Star Wars universe, and I can't wait to talk about it because I'm a really big fan of The Mandalorian. I think it's really great and very different from all the other stuff Star Wars has produced. It has some really great characters, and it just does a really great job of just reviving my love for Star Wars after the trilogy from a couple years ago really ruined that. So I'm really back into Star Wars. I love it. Can't wait for Jedi Survivor next week, and I gotta say I'm full on with the Star Wars mania right now. I have to admit I haven't catched up on shows like Andor, The Clone Wars, and The Bad Batch, but I might do that soon. But I gotta say that this one really does a great job at setting itself apart, specifically because I'm really interested in the story of the Mandalorians, of Mandalore. I think that was one of my favorite stories from the Clone Wars era in the prequels, and right now we get to explore that in a much more richer way. So the third season of The Mandalorian does that and a lot more, but it also focuses on the two main characters that everybody loves. So The Mandalorian Season 3 does all that and more, but as everybody knows, it focuses more on the main two characters, which are Din Djarin, also known as the Mandalorian, and Grogu, also known as Baby Yoda. So I gotta say, this is a very interesting season, because over the course of Seasons 1 and 2, the main mission of Din Djarin was to return Grogu to the Jedi, which are the original people he came from, and after the fall of the Jedi in Episode 3, Grogu became lost, and then he was found by the Mandalorian, so he made it his entire mission to basically return him back home. And over the course of the show, he grows much more closer and more attached to this youngling, which reminds me of another hit series that just came out recently. I wonder which one it is. But in Season 3, that plot was left behind. As we saw in the book of Boba Fett, Grogu chose to go back to Din Djarin. He became like his kind of like adopted son, and that's what sets off the story of Season 3. So in the story, Din Djarin basically takes Grogu with him on adventures, and he also goes on a path of redemption to go back to his Mandalorian tribe. And we saw glimpses of how they worked in the first and second seasons, but as I said before, this season really focuses on them. So over the course of the series, we see the plot evolve from Din Djarin traveling to Mandalore and basically trying to redeem himself to basically uncover a secret from the Mandalorians, and also basically that ties into a whole plot where the Mandalorians try to unite each other basically again to retake their home planet. And that's something I really enjoyed, because this show takes a lot more different locations from the Star Wars universe and works with them, especially Coruscant, which is probably my favorite Star Wars planet because of the concept of this just like gigantic capital planet. I just love that planet so much, and I was really interesting to see the politics, especially I think in Episode 3, where we follow a doctor and basically uncovering secrets from the Empire and how that relates to Moff Gideon, and also the path to the First Order, which we saw in Episode 7. So that whole storyline in Episode 3 just takes a small part of the story, but I think it also does a good job of basically setting up future Star Wars projects, which might come in handy because I think Disney's really going to cash in on this property, and we might see a lot of really interesting Star Wars projects, some great, some not so great, and I'm excited to see where it goes. So I really enjoy to see how the politics of this universe works, because we don't really get to see much of that in the original movies, except maybe the prequels. I think they play with that more a little bit, but I also enjoy the action-adventure parts of Star Wars. And as always, the acting and writing are pretty good. I mean, each episode makes you really interesting in what's going to come up next. I mean, it's not like Game of Thrones level writing, but it still does a great job of keeping you engaged. That's something I really appreciate it. And like I said before, I think the whole story with the Mandalorians, their culture, their traditions, their factions, like how they split and they fought between each other, that's a really interesting part of their history that we explore in the season. For example, after Din Djarin's initial adventure, he goes to search for Bo-Katan, who helps him to try unite the tribes of Mandalore, and that's where the whole story continues. And I gotta admit that in the beginning, like, I didn't know where the story was gonna go. I thought it was just gonna be random adventures. Like in the first few episodes, you kind of like don't get the sense of where the story is going, but the second half of the season makes up for that, and that's something I really liked about The Mandalorian Season 3. And in terms of characters, this season focuses much more on Bo-Katan. I feel like the main season of The Mandalorian is kind of like split between Din Djarin and Bo-Katan, and that's something interesting because this series, like I think they said that it focuses more on the Mandalorians in general, and I like that, but I still feel like Din Djarin is the main character. I think everybody loves him, everybody loves Grogu, and I appreciate that they didn't like get pushed aside in like the second half, and it was still interesting to see how Bo-Katan like evolved her character, and we saw more of her. So I might go probably watch Rebels or some of the other shows to see how her character was before the events of The Mandalorian. So in the ending of the season, we see like a full battle between the Mandalorians and the kind of like the remnants of the Empire at the end with Moff Gideon, and like basically they take like a base in Mandalore, and they try to retake him and they fight him, which is not really explained before that, like how they got there. I think it was kind of like conveniently placed for the plot, like the story, and make it more interesting. So, and also I feel like the Moff Gideon story got a little bit dragged out. I mean, it kind of like, I gotta admit, it makes like a really good thing to have like this like nemesis for the Mandalorian. Basically, Moff Gideon is like the Joker for Din Djarin's Batman in a sense, like over the course of the three seasons. But you know, spoilers ahead. Basically, Moff Gideon dies at the end, and basically they retake Mandalore, and that pretty much wraps up that whole story. I don't think they're going to bring him back after that, after basically defeating him for the third time. That would be ridiculous for season 4, but still, you know, it wraps up a pretty interesting story. And I gotta admit that Moff Gideon was really well played by Giancarlo Esposito. He's one of my favorite actors, and it was really nice to see him in that role. So basically, at the end, they retake Mandalore, and I gotta say it's a really interesting planet. It's a really interesting culture, and basically they have a really happy ending. And I can't wait to see where it goes from here, how they use the Mandalorians in future movies or future TV shows. I think that's a part of Star Wars that I would love to like see them explore. And I think they will, because these are characters that are becoming really popular. I feel like the Mandalorian has its own very special place in the Star Wars universe and the world of Mandalore, the Mandalorians, and all that culture. So I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. Also, I love Baby Yoda's story throughout the season, and I'm going to keep calling him Baby Yoda because he's always going to be Baby Yoda in my heart, even though he's called Din Grogu now. So basically, Din Djarin adopts him. He becomes his adopted son, and he now becomes a foundling for the Mandalorian. So he's basically a Mandalorian in training until he can speak and take the oath, which is going to be really interesting. I can't wait to see Baby Yoda with the full-on Mandalorian helmet, you know, just like 100 years old, walking around and saying stuff like, this is the way. Basically becoming like this full badass Jedi Mandalorian Yoda thing. It's going to be really interesting, and I can't wait to see that. So yeah, I love these characters. I love this story. And yeah, those are pretty much all my thoughts on The Mandalorian Season 3. Like the other 2 previous seasons, I'm going to give it an 82 out of 100. It doesn't really do much that really elevates it over the other seasons. It's just kind of like the continuation of that story I really enjoy. And yeah, you know, if you like Star Wars, this is probably the project you would want to watch the most. And I can't wait to see what other Star Wars projects come out in the next few years. So anyways, that's pretty much everything for today. So if you like this video, please subscribe everywhere. Follow me on my social media. Follow me on Twitch, especially next week, because I'll be playing Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So anyways, that's everything for today, and I'll see you guys later.